The South African Roundtable, private sector roundtable that is looking to explore opportunities that is coming through from the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Today you find us in Sandton, where some of those role players in the private sector have been meeting with the Secretariat, including the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, to ensure that the ball is rolling and South Africa get the best out of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area. Today we heard from Minister Pakstau, who gave us a sense of how the country is moving here in terms of ensuring that the support to these businesses. At the same time, we see the SG of the AfCFTA, this has been the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, Mr. Wamkele Mene, giving us a sense of how then things have been faring since the launch of AfCFTA. And I must say to you, the ball is seemingly rolling here, and we're seeing some of those opportunities coming through. And today with him also bringing a little bit of assurance to the private sector that they're going to be supported in penetrating the economy on the continent. I'm going to bring him into the conversation now, the SG, Mr. Wamkele Mene, who'll just give us a sense of where we find ourselves, where AfCFTA is concerned. You're saying that it's exciting times because now the hurdles, the legal hurdles have been explored, that is done, and now we're seeing the ball rolling in terms of the trade that is well needed on the continent. Let's start, more or less before going into what has been happening. Let me get your initial reaction to what is happening globally, the uncertainty that is coming through from the United States, and we know very well that that also has a bearing on the work that you guys do as AfCFTA, looking at some of these agreements. It looks like we are uncertain here as South Africa, but including the entire globe and the continent, looking at developments coming out of this new administration in the United States. Where do we find you in all of these developments?
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. What is clear is that since the 20th of January, we are seeing the weaponization of trade policy. We are seeing trade rules, tariffs being used as a weapon rather than as an instrument of trade. We are seeing increased macroeconomic instability. We are seeing investment nationalism. We're seeing economic nationalism, and I believe it's going to get worse. It will impact on African countries and South Africa, I believe. AGOA, which was set to be renewed towards the end of this year, looks certainly very, very unlikely that it will be renewed in the manner in which we had been accustomed to over the last 25 years. And all of this is a crisis. But it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for the African continent to consolidate itself as a market for intra-Africa trade, for intra-Africa investment, so that we ensure that even in the middle of all of this uncertainty, we build an alternative market for ourselves. It's a market of 1.4 billion people with a combined purchasing parity of 6.8 trillion United States dollars. So it is a significant market, but it's fragmented. So through the AfCFTA and our heads of states, we have been working steadily over the last 5 years to eliminate those intra-Africa barriers to trade, to ensure that we overcome the fragmentation that exists. So we are in a crisis. At the same time, we have an opportunity through the AfCFTA to build an alternative trade market.
We see you today meeting with the private sector, and they too have allayed their challenges in terms of penetrating the market, tariffs and the likes, including the uncertainty that exists on the ground. Let's get a sense of your takeaway from this engagement here. And we saw you also coming through with an introduction of a fund that would cushion them in terms of acting and moving into the market. Maybe give us a sense of your takeaway, and how do we find you here today?
This is part of our engagement of the private sector through the continent. Last month we were in Nigeria, we were in Chad. We will go to other African countries, engaging the private sector in these countries, because we believe that it is through private sector engagement and private sector awareness that we can see enhanced intra-Africa trade flows. There were challenges that were raised about accessing the market, the cost of trade finance, the cost of infrastructure, the cost of transport and logistics, the issue of understanding of the rules for trade. All of these were raised by the private sector today. And we have in place mechanisms to respond to some of the challenges that were raised. One of the most important aspects that we brought to the private sector are the interventions of support. First, we have established the AfCFTA Adjustment Fund. We have already capitalized it by over $1 billion. We have committed to raise up to $10 billion. We are working on this with AfCFTA Bank, and I'm very grateful to AfCFTA Bank for making the capital available to enable the private sector to take advantage. Second, we announced today a facility of $1 billion for the auto sector, particularly components manufacturing. In the room were components manufacturers. This fund is intended to support them to be part of the value chain of assembly of vehicles on the continent. And it ranges from copper processing, rubber processing, all of these very, very important components to making a vehicle. Again, $1 billion for this through AfCFTA Bank, and we want our particularly small SMEs that are in the manufacturing of components to take advantage of this facility.
Mene, thank you very much, sir, for your time. I have to let you go. You're pressed for time, but Mr. Mene just giving us a sense of optimism really coming through from AfCFTA as we see them just moving into the continent and helping most of these countries that would want to capitalize on the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement. As you see him saying that it's the green light, and they would need to work on also the harmonizing of policies as well to ensure that those barriers like infrastructure and the likes are a thing of the past. I'm Katlego for SABC News in Sandton.